Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today I wanted to talk about the idea of obviously bringing more World War I stuff to the game. With the updates coming up, one of the things that was added to it is the Flanders map, and the Flanders map is very much kind of set up around the idea of the First World War. If you've ever done any reading on it, or if you've ever done any kind of like interesting looks into it, you'll understand that a lot of the themes, especially of the early version of the map, are very much based around the First World War, especially with Flanders Field being a quite large thing. We're also coming up to Remembrance Day, which of course is first of all, centered around the First World War, but also in all conflicts across the world over a period of time. But its symbol is the poppy, which of course is from the area of Flanders. And we'll probably get into that more on the day itself and its history, because I think it's really important to actually cover that stuff. But in this video, we're going to talk about the idea of adding First World War to War Thunder, not just in terms of ground vehicles, but also in aviation. Before we start this, we already have World War I in the game. And I don't mean the tanks, I don't mean the aircraft, I actually mean the naval side of things. We already have a lot of battleships, a lot of battle cruisers, which are from that era and actually fought in the First World War. We even have a standard cruiser, I believe the Emden was from the First World War, and even maybe a destroyer from the Italian side of things, and I'm sure we're going to get more going forward. And when it comes to World War I, it's already represented in a part of the game which not exactly everybody sees. So we technically already have it, but of course all of the conversations around the First World War always talk about the idea of tanks and also the idea of aircraft being represented in the game. And I understand why people are interested in this, because the simple fact is War Thunder is an ever-expanding game. It's one of those which will constantly go forward and modernize in the idea of trying to get more people into it and adding more modern vehicles which more people are into. But at the same time, there is a lot of people, including myself, who are very interested in the history of the First World War and how it all came about and also what happened into it, since for me it is very much a interesting idea of power struggles, not just between countries, but between the governance of those countries and the men who fought for them. The interesting thing overall is that War Thunder has forever tried to push itself to the modern era. Now, when we have a look at ground forces, it's already got to that point and did a long time ago. Now what they're doing is they're adding different types of vehicles into the game. So they added in all of the MBTs to start with, then they started adding all of the light vehicles, like the light tanks for example, and now we're in the SBH era, where it seems like SBHs are the ones which are moving around the place, and also stuff like more ATGM carriers. That's what seems to be the main focus. In aviation, it's just the bigger, better, more modern aircraft, because we're not at the point at what ground is at right now. We're still technically in the early 2000s for aircraft, if you have a look at stuff like China, but if you have a look at other nations, we're stuck in the 70s and 80s, and I'm sure it'll just keep going more modern. But there's always this thought about why not go backwards? Why not create a layer under the reserve aircraft and also tanks, which could kind of fit in this way? Now, the planes part is probably the part which has the most kind of ideas for it. For the ground idea for the First World War, there really isn't a ton of vehicles you can add. They're also not really designed to fight each other, and at the same time they were designed for specific purposes in a way of modernizing each other. And also, when it comes to the aircraft, a lot of them started off as the idea of being kind of recon aircraft with slightly different, additions to it. And then on top of that, they started kind of modernizing and creating fighter variants, creating bomber variants, and many different countries had access to some pretty cool pieces of machinery. So for me, when I compare these aircraft to even the ones that we have at reserve, they are incredibly worse than them because of the fact they have very weak armament, and the main thing is just the engine power is not there for the vehicles themselves. But there are still some which sit in history, and also many people will know about. The Sopwith Camel, for example, the Fokker D series, with, of course, the good old Baron. Even stuff like the Bristol fighters, which were around the place, and the Tri-bombers, which you find from places such as Italy and many others. There are plenty of cool and interesting biplanes that they could add to the game. The only real question is, how do you add them? And I've always been in favor of this idea of having an expansion of the game, some kind of DLC content where you pay however many dollars, let's say $20, and you get access to what would be classed as this under tier of the game. And if it's popular enough, then you can have this PvP area where people fight each other, or what it can be is some dynamic missions, like dynamic campaign or single missions based around stuff like World War mode, where you go into it and the battle kind of plays out by itself, with the commanders going where, you're supposed to do, following some historical ideas, and then you influence the battle in the ways that you want to, picking the specific battles that you want and playing those specific vehicles. And if you do that, you can get decals, you can get camouflages, and all of this other stuff. I always thought that kind of idea would work pretty well, and was very saddened by the fact that in one of the Q&As that Gaijin did a while ago for a Polish magazine, or a Polish internet site, they said that they went away from that type of content because people preferred the multiplayer side, and that's completely fair. I completely understand that, but I also understand with the PvE content of War Thunder ever expanding, I've got a feeling that that stuff also would be nice to see worked on too. Like this idea of, okay, we're going to release a World War I campaign. It's going to focus on, the First World War, and from the German side. So you play all of these different vehicles, and if you purchase this pack, you'll get access to all of them, and through the campaign, you'll be able to, bring them out. Now, this does mean that you probably wouldn't be able to use them in standard battles, because they would just get hammered. And as I said, if the packs get popular enough, and if enough people like them, then you will already have a player base there who can play them. And then the idea is you could just add them to the standard tech trees for people to, play. And then the people who bought the packs can get some bonuses from that stuff as well. And the only issue there is when people start the game, they will now be starting with First World War aircraft, which might be a little bit outclassed, even compared to stuff like mid-1920s aircraft, which is stuff that we already have. So for me, that's how I would do it. That's how I would add it in. And then if it meant that there wasn't enough people actually playing these modes in the game and playing the content, instead what I would do is I would just isolate it to those kind of PvE modes, or maybe you could squad up with people, kind of like the dynamic campaign, and then if you have the vehicles in your hangar, you can bring them out in custom battles. You can bring them out in areas which are not as PvP focused, and instead just focus more around fun, so people can, kind of show them. I always like the idea as well of custom, hangars, where you could actually kind of plonk specific vehicles in specific points of the hangar, and therefore you could kind of plonk these vehicles in your hangar to kind of show them off, and then, other people could view your hangar and kind of see your drip, as as they would put it. So that to me is always something that I thought would be kind of cool. Now, aircraft would work, because there is a lot of different ones, many different nations, France, Britain, Germany, Italy, all made their own, even America made their own. There's enough across the place to do this. Tanks is a little bit rough, obviously with the way that tanks were and the way that everything was set up. It wasn't exactly, first of all, a fair battle between two sides, and also at the same time, they just weren't designed to attack each other until even some of the later variants. They were more designed to help the infantry push, to destroy stuff like machine gun and artillery emplacements, and just simply walk across the battlefield. This is not always how they were used, but was the main thrust of them, which is why they were designed the way that they were. Now, What I would actually do for tanks, because I don't think these vehicles would fit into the modern game, even if you compare them to vehicles that we have, like the A1E1 Independent, and even the Char, from, I believe, 1925 was the A1E1 Independent, and the Char was maybe just before. They are fundamentally better vehicles in every way compared to these ones from the First World War. But the way I would implement these, since there is only maybe 2 or 3 vehicles that many people actually know about from the First World War, I would add them in an event. Now, there's something that I've talked about in the past, and I'll bring up again, is the idea of the first tank-on-tank battle. The first tank-on-tank battle happened at Villers-Bretonneux, and it was a French town, and it was British tanks which ran into German tanks. It was the first time these metal behemoths ran into each other and were able to kind of fight each other in a, one-on-one setting. And basically, you had 12 Mark IV tanks, which went up against the German A7Vs. You had 13 A7Vs, which were around the place. And they basically fought each other, and with infantry coming in, even though it was a short battle, 6 of the British Mark IVs were sidelined by battle damage, and 2 A7s suffered mechanical breakdowns, while a third was heavily damaged by the guns of a Mark IV, showing that they can actually, damage each other. And it was ditched because they were worried that the vehicle was going to explode. So basically there was a fight between these tanks. They did, shoot each other while the infantry was around, and it was, in fact, a actual contest. Now, what I would do is, now this battle happened, I believe, on the 26th of April, or around that time. I would just do an event per year for the weekend of that, specific date, or around that, or maybe the 24th of April, because that's when the assault was actually launched by the Germans. What I would do is I would just have an event in the events tab where it's like, okay, if you want to play these tanks against each other, you can do. And if you play a specific amount of battles, or if you win a certain amount of times, or destroy a certain amount of times, you get the vehicle. And you have to play both sides to get both vehicles. And what this means is once you complete this, you get the vehicles in your hangar. Now, they would be special event vehicles. You would be able to use them in standard, you wouldn't be able to use them in standard battles, but instead you could once again bring them out in custom battles, and also you could have them around your hangar, giving you a bit of history when it comes to War Thunder. That's one thing that I think is severely missing when it comes to War Thunder, the idea of legacy of the player. And it's one of those things that a lot of game companies have done well, the idea of showing you all of the statistics around what you play and around what you go for, and people are really interested in that stuff. And I feel like in War Thunder that could be the case too, and this could be one of those areas where you do that. Not everything has to be done just for grinding. Not everything has to be done just to get that new shiny vehicle to modify. Some of the things it's just nice to have, kind of like the pages of history profile pictures or the decals from the several events that they do. They're just nice to collect and nice to have and look back on and go, I remember that time. And that's how I think First World War vehicles should be. Not necessarily ones which actually work in a PvP setting, but ones that can be brought out in custom battles to kind of show to your friends and show what they look like. And then secondly, to just have in the hangar to kind of show what you have grinded for. I think those ideas are ones which are vastly overlooked when it comes to War Thunder, or focused on areas which may not be as there as others. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.